I never believed in love, I said while staring at the city lights from my office window. Oliver laughed on the phone. That's what rich men say after they stop trusting people. I stopped trusting people long before the money, I replied. He sighed. Still working late, Ethan? Always, I said. 10 million doesn't manage itself. He paused. You sound empty, not successful. I didn't answer because he was right. My life was money, meetings, and silence. Until I met Amelia Hartwell. The first time I saw her, she was at a charity event. She walked up to me and said, "So you're the famous Ethan Clark?" I replied, "Famous for what?" She smiled softly. "For building an empire alone." That one sentence stuck in my head. Later, I told Oliver, "She's different." He raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "She looks at me like I'm not just money." He laughed. "That's dangerous." I ignored him. Within weeks, Amelia and I started meeting more often. One evening she said, "Do you ever get tired of being alone?" I said, "I don't have time for loneliness." She tilted her head. "That sounds like a lie." I frowned. "And you sound too curious." She smiled again. "Maybe I am." That night, I couldn't sleep. A month later, I proposed. People call me crazy. Oliver even said, "You're marrying someone you barely know." "I know enough," I said. "What do you know?" he asked. "She doesn't fear my money." He shook his head. "That's not love, Ethan. That's just confidence." I didn't listen. The wedding was grand. Her father, Richard Hartwell, shook my hand tightly. "You've made a wise decision joining our family." Her mother, Victoria, added, "Amelia is a perfect wife." Amelia stood beside me in white, smiling like she belonged in a dream. But something felt wrong. During the ceremony, I whispered, "Are you okay?" She replied softly, "Yes, why?" "You seem far away." She squeezed my hand. "Just nervous." I nodded, but I didn't believe her. At the reception, Oliver leaned close. "Still think this is love?" I said, "It feels real." He looked at Amelia dancing with guests. "Real things don't feel rehearsed." I ignored him again. Later that night, I noticed her phone vibrating nonstop. I asked, "Who keeps calling you?" She quickly locked it. "Work stuff." "On your wedding night?" She smiled lightly. "Some people don't respect timing." I studied her face. Something flickered behind her eyes. But I told myself I was overthinking. When we finally got alone, I said, "We did it." She nodded. "Yes, we did." I asked, "Are you happy?" A pause. Then she answered, "I am safe." That answer stayed with me longer than I expected. I asked again, "Safe from what?" She looked at me and said, "From being alone." I laughed softly. "You won't be alone now." She didn't respond. Instead, she turned away and said, "It's been a long day." I watched her sit near the window, still holding her phone. Something inside me felt uneasy. I walked up and said, "Amelia, talk to me." She smiled faintly. "About what?" "Us." She hesitated for a second too long. Then she said, "We'll figure it out." I nodded, but inside I felt something shift. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I looked at her while she rested beside me. Her phone lit up once more. She turned slightly, blocking the screen. And in that moment, I realized something small but sharp. I didn't fully know the woman I married. And that thought was the first crack in my perfect life. I started noticing small changes after the wedding, things I couldn't explain but couldn't ignore either. "Amelia," I said one morning while she sat at the breakfast table, "you left again last night without telling me." She didn't look up. "It was just a quick meeting, Ethan." "A meeting at midnight?" I asked. She finally looked at me. "You're not my manager." I stayed calm. "I'm your husband." She smiled lightly. "And I'm still allowed to have my own life." That answer didn't sit right with me. Later, I called Oliver. "I think something's off," I said. He replied immediately, "You're finally noticing." "What does that mean?" I asked. He sighed. "It means I've been worried for weeks." I leaned back. "You should have told me." "I did," he said. "You just didn't listen." That hit harder than I expected. At night, I confronted Amelia again. "Where were you yesterday?" She didn't even hesitate. "With friends." "What friends?" I asked. She closed her phone. "Do you really want to turn this into an interrogation?" I lowered my voice. "I just want honesty." She stood up. "Then trust me." I watched her walk away, feeling more distance between us than ever. The next day, Sophie Lane stopped me near the hallway. "Sir," she said nervously. "Yes, Sophie." I replied. She looked down. I saw Mrs. Clark yesterday. I frowned. Where? Near the Grand Hotel, she said. She was with a man. I felt my chest tighten. Are you sure? She nodded quickly. Yes, sir. They looked close. I forced a small laugh. You must be mistaken. But inside, something cracked. That evening, I told Oliver everything. He said, Now do you believe me? I didn't answer. Instead, I said, It could be nothing. He leaned forward. Or it could be everything. At home, Amelia acted normal again. She smiled at me. You're quiet tonight. I forced a smile. Just tired. She touched my hand. You work too much. I almost believed her again. Almost. But then her phone rang. She looked at it and turned it away from me. I asked, Who is it this time? She said, Work. Too fast. Too rehearsed. Later, I sat alone in my office. Oliver texted me, Don't ignore signs. I stared at the screen. I whispered to myself, What if I'm wrong? But another voice answered inside me. What if I'm not? And for the first time since the wedding, I stopped trusting my own peace. The next evening, Richard Hartwell called me personally. Ethan, he said warmly, I hope Amelia is treating you well. Yes, I replied. He laughed. Good. You're a lucky man, you know that. I hesitated. Why do you say that? Amelia is rare, he said. Don't lose what you have. After the call ended, I sat in silence. Oliver arrived later without warning. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said. I talked to her father, I replied. And he asked. He called me lucky, I said. Oliver scoffed. That's not reassurance. That's pressure. I rubbed my forehead. I don't know what to believe anymore. He leaned closer. Believe actions, not words. That night, Amelia came home smiling. Why are you both so serious? She asked while pouring wine. I said, Your father called me. She paused. Oh, he said I'm lucky. I added. She laughed softly. Well, you are. I studied her face. Where were you today? She didn't even blink. Shopping. With who? I asked. She smiled. Do you always question me like this now? I stayed quiet. She walked closer and touched my shoulder. Ethan, you're overthinking. I forced a nod. Maybe. But when she turned away, I whispered. Or maybe I'm finally thinking clearly. Later, Sophie passed me again in the corridor. She stopped. Sir. I didn't want to say anything else before. I looked at her. Say it. She lowered her voice. The man I saw, he was waiting for a car. My stomach tightened. Did you see his face? She nodded. Yes. Who was it? I asked. She hesitated. I think his name is Daniel. That name stayed in my head like a burning echo. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I looked at Amelia beside me and thought, Who are you really? And for the first time, I stopped pretending everything was fine. I kept staring at her sleeping face, trying to find something real. Amelia, I whispered softly. She didn't wake. I clenched my fists and thought, Am I losing my mind or losing my wife? My phone lit up again. It was Oliver. Don't stay silent, he texted. I replied, I'm not silent. I'm watching. He replied instantly, Then you already know. I looked at Amelia again and said quietly, If you are lying, I will find out everything. The room felt colder than before. For the first time, I didn't feel love when I looked at her. I felt distance. And that distance felt like the beginning of something I couldn't stop. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the city lights like answers I couldn't reach. Oliver's words kept repeating in my mind, louder than anything else. Then you already know. I whispered to myself, Maybe I do, but I'm afraid to accept it. Behind me, Amelia turned slightly in her sleep, still peaceful, still hiding something I no longer trusted from the truth itself. I'm working late tonight, Amelia said while fixing her earrings in front of the mirror. I leaned against the door. Another late meeting? She nodded without turning. Important business dinner. I watched her carefully. With who? She finally looked at me. Clients. Something in her voice felt rehearsed again. I said quietly, You've had a lot of these lately. She smiled slightly. That's part of life, Ethan. And she walked past me. Before leaving, she kissed my cheek lightly and said, Don't wait up. The door closed, and I stood there longer than I should have. I grabbed my coat and keys. Oliver picked up immediately when I called. Tell me you're not doing something stupid, he said. I think she's lying, I replied. He paused. Where is she? Business dinner, I said. He sighed. And you don't believe that? I don't, I said. There was silence before he answered. Then follow her. But stay smart. I drove behind her car slowly, keeping distance. She didn't go near any business district. Instead, she stopped near a private restaurant on the east side of the city. I parked far enough so she wouldn't notice. Then I saw him. A man stepped out and walked toward her. Tall, calm, confident. He smiled like he knew her too well. I whispered, "Who are you?" Then she hugged him. Not a formal hug. A real one. Close. Familiar. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I called Oliver instantly. I found her, I said. Where? He asked quickly. Private restaurant. He sighed. I replied. He said sharply, Ethan, don't rush in. I'm not, I said. I'm watching. The man held her hand as they walked inside. Oliver's voice softened. Did you see his face? Yes, I said. Do you know him? He asked. I hesitated. No, I said. But she does. I stayed outside for almost an hour. When she came out, she wasn't alone. The same man walked beside her again. They laughed. That laugh hit me harder than anything else. I whispered, that's not business. Oliver said, Ethan, go home. But I didn't move. I followed them again. They stopped near a quieter street. She touched his arm. He leaned closer. And for a second, I thought they might kiss. I turned my head away. My chest felt tight. I drove back home before they could notice me. When I entered the house, everything felt normal. Too normal. Amelia was already back, sitting on the couch, reading something calmly. She looked up and said, You're home early. I forced a smile. Meeting got canceled. She nodded. That happens. I watched her carefully. How was your dinner? She didn't blink. Productive. I sat across from her. Who were the clients? She closed her book slowly. Why so many questions tonight? I leaned forward. Just curious. She smiled faintly. You never used to be this curious. That line hit me. I said, people change. She replied, so do relationships. Silence filled the room. Later, I called Oliver again. I saw them, I said. He didn't ask what I saw. He said, I'm sorry. I closed my eyes. I need proof. He replied, then stop reacting. Start collecting. The next morning, I acted normal. But inside, I was watching everything. Amelia kissed me before leaving. Busy day again, she said. I replied softly, always. After she left, Richard Hartwell called me. Ethan, he said warmly, I hope Amelia is happy with you. Yes, I replied. He chuckled. Good. Because you two together, it's perfect for business too. That last line stayed with me. I asked, what do you mean? He laughed again. Just saying. Family unity helps investments. After the call, I sat still. Oliver came over without warning. You look worse, he said. I followed her, I replied. He sat down. And I saw her with someone, I said. Same guy, he asked. I nodded. Yes. He leaned back. Then it's real. I clenched my fists. Or I'm being played. He looked at me seriously. Ethan, listen to me. What? I asked. If this is about money, you need to wake up. That sentence hit harder than anything before. That night, Amelia came home late again. I asked calmly, another business dinner? She smiled. Yes. I said, you seem busy every night now. She walked past me. That's how success works. I turned slowly, or how secrets work. She stopped for half a second, then continued walking. No reply, no denial, just silence. And that silence said everything. Later, I opened my laptop. I checked our shared accounts. Strange transactions appeared. Transfers I never approved. I whispered, what is this? My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. A man's voice said, Ethan Clark? Yes, I said. He replied, you should check your wife's company records. Then he hung up. I sat there frozen. Oliver texted, don't trust anyone now. I looked at Amelia sleeping that night. And I finally understood something I didn't want to accept. This wasn't just betrayal. This was planned, and I was already inside it. I closed my office door and said quietly, I need someone I can trust. Oliver stood near the window. Then you picked the wrong world, Ethan. I don't have a choice, I replied. He nodded slowly. Inspector James Carter, retired fraud investigator. He hates liars more than you do right now. Can he be trusted? I asked. Oliver gave a short laugh. In this case, yes. That same night, I met Carter in a quiet cafe. He looked at me directly. You think your wife is hiding financial activity? I said, I don't think. I know something is wrong. He leaned forward. Then give me everything. I slid my laptop toward him. Start here. He studied the screen. These transfers, they're offshore. I frowned. Offshore. He nodded. Someone is moving money carefully. Not randomly. I felt my chest tighten. My money. He looked up. Yes. I whispered, how much? He said calmly. Enough to matter. My hands clenched. Find out who. He replied, I will. The next day, Oliver introduced me to Charlotte Hughes. She adjusted her glasses. I already looked at partial records. I asked, and she didn't hesitate. Your wife can legally access parts of your assets. I frowned. Legally? She nodded. If signatures were obtained correctly. I leaned forward. I never signed anything like that. She looked at me carefully. Then someone did it for you. Silence hit the table. Oliver muttered, that's impossible. Charlotte said, not if documents were prepared in advance. My voice dropped. So this is planned? She replied, yes. That word felt like a knife. Later that evening, Sophie stopped me again in the hallway. Sir, she said nervously. I turned. What is it? She hesitated. I saw him again. My stomach tightened. Daniel? She nodded. He entered the house when you were away. I froze. When? Twice this week, she said. I whispered. Did Amelia know? Sophie looked down. She let him in. My breath stopped. I said quietly, thank you, Sophie. Don't tell anyone. She nodded and left quickly. I stood there alone longer than I should have. That night, Amelia came home smiling. She said, you look tired. I replied, work. She walked closer. You should rest. I studied her face. Where were you today? She didn't blink. Shopping with my mother. I nodded slowly. Of course. She touched my arm. You're distant lately. I forced a small smile. Just busy. She sighed. We should go out soon. I asked why. She smiled. Anniversary dinner. Remember? I stared at her. You planned it. She nodded. Of course I did. I said sounds nice. But inside I felt nothing. After she slept, I called Oliver. She's planning an anniversary dinner, I said. He replied, and? I said, she's acting normal. He was silent. Then he said, that's the most dangerous part. The next day, Carter called me. We found more transfers, he said. I asked where. He replied, multiple accounts. Layered movement. I said, meaning? He answered, someone is hiding intent. My voice lowered. Amelia? He didn't confirm. He just said, you decide what you believe. That night, Charlotte called me again. She said, there's more. I asked what now. She replied, a secondary signature trail. I froze. Explain. She said, someone is slowly taking control of your business shares. I whispered, slowly stealing them. Yes, she said. I closed my eyes. Can you stop it? She replied, not without proof of fraud. I said, then we get proof. She answered carefully. After the call, I sat in silence. Oliver came in and said, you're not sleeping. I can't, I replied. He asked, what's the plan now? I stood up slowly. I tendered dinner. He frowned. Why? I said, because she wants normal. He asked, and you? I looked at him. I want truth. The night of the dinner arrived. Amelia smiled beautifully. You look good tonight. I replied, so do you. She held my hand. Let's make this special. I nodded. Yes. At the restaurant, she laughed, talked, and acted like everything was perfect. She said, we should travel soon. I smiled lightly. Maybe. Inside, I watched every movement, every word, every lie. She touched my hand again. You're quiet. I said softly, just thinking. She leaned closer. About what? I looked at her and said, us. She smiled. We're fine. I nodded. Of course. But inside, I made my decision. This wasn't love anymore. This was evidence gathering. This was survival. After dinner, she kissed my cheek. I love you, she said. I replied, I know. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I meant it. That night, I sat alone in my office. I opened every report, every file, every lie, and I whispered, this ends soon. Not with tears, not with forgiveness, but with truth. I stood in front of the mirror and adjusted my suit. Oliver's voice came through the phone. "Tonight is your anniversary dinner, right?" I replied, "Yes." He said quietly, "Don't do anything reckless." I paused. "I won't." But I already knew I was lying. Amelia walked in smiling. "Ready?" I nodded. "You look beautiful." She touched my hand. "You too." Then she said, "Tonight should be special." I looked at her and replied, "It will be." We left together, but I wasn't going where she thought. Halfway through the drive, I said, "I need to stop by my office quickly." She frowned. "Tonight?" I nodded. "Urgent email." She sighed. "I'll wait." I smiled. "Don't. Go ahead to dinner. I'll meet you." She hesitated. "Are you sure?" I said softly, "Yes." She believed me. And that was the last mistake she made with me. The moment she left, I followed her car again. Oliver whispered through the phone, "You're doing it again." "I need proof," I said. He replied, "Or you need peace." "I don't want peace," I said. "I want truth." Her car stopped near a private villa. Oliver said sharply, "Ethan, stop." But I was already parking. I whispered, "She's here." I watched her step out. And then I saw him, Daniel Whitmore. He opened the door for her, like she belonged there. She smiled. That smile didn't belong to me anymore. I followed quietly. Through the garden. Through the side entrance. They didn't see me. I reached a window, and I saw everything. They were sitting close, laughing, her hand on his arm, his voice calm, her head tilted like she was free. I whispered, "So this is real." My chest tightened, but I didn't cry. I didn't move. I just watched. Oliver said, "Ethan, say something." I replied, "I am." He asked, "What do you see?" I said, "The end of my marriage." Then I raised my phone. I took photos, one after another, then video. My hands were steady, too steady. Oliver said, "Come back now." I said, "Not yet." I sent everything to Charlotte. She replied instantly, "This is enough evidence to start action." I whispered, "Good." Amelia laughed inside the villa again. That sound didn't hurt anymore. It confirmed everything. Oliver said, "Talk to me." I said, "I'm done being blind." He paused. "What now?" I looked at the villa and said, "Now I prepare." My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. A deep voice said, "Ethan Clark." I replied, "Who is this?" The voice said, "Richard Hartwell." My grip tightened. He said, "We need another investment transfer." Immediately, I laughed softly. He paused. "What's funny?" I said, "You're asking me for money tonight?" He snapped, "It's important business." I looked at the villa window again. "I think I understand your business now," I said. Silence. Then he said, "What does that mean?" I replied, "Nothing." And I ended the call. Oliver said, "That was her father?" "Yes," I said. He asked, "Still think this is just her?" I looked at the villa again. Daniel. Amelia. The lies. I said slowly, "No." Then I added, "It's all of them." Oliver went quiet. I walked away from the villa, but something inside me had already changed. I wasn't the man who came here hoping for truth. I was the man who had found it. And it was ugly. At home, Amelia texted me, "Where are you?" I stared at it for a long time, then replied, "On my way." But I wasn't going home as her husband anymore. I was going back as someone she no longer understood. Later that night, I sat alone in my car. Photos on my screen. Videos loaded. Evidence confirmed. I whispered, "This is over." Not my voice of pain. Not confusion. It was certainty. Oliver texted, "Are you okay?" I replied, "No, but I'm ready." He wrote back, "For what?" I looked at the villa in my memory again and said quietly, "Everything." Charlotte called me early in the morning. She said, "I filed the first legal motion quietly." I sat up. "Already?" She replied, "You wanted speed, not comfort." I nodded. "Good." She added, "Inspector Carter has also frozen 2 accounts." I asked, "How many more are there?" She said, "We're still tracking." I whispered, "Then keep going." Oliver entered my office and said, "You look different today." I replied, "I feel different." He frowned. "In a good way?" I said, "In a controlled way." He studied me. "That's dangerous." I smiled slightly. So is being lied to. Later, Carter called me. He said, "More suspicious accounts are moving." I asked, "Can you stop them?" He replied, "We can freeze but not recover yet. I said, then freeze everything. He paused. That will trigger alarms. I said coldly, let them ring. After the call, Oliver said, you're going all in now. I replied, I'm already in. That afternoon, I met Marcus Reed. I said, you wanted to see me? He nodded. You don't trust me. I replied, I don't trust anyone right now. He smirked. Fair. He slid a folder across the table. Look at this, he said. I opened it. My eyes narrowed. These are Hartwell records. He said, not just yours. Others too. I looked up. Others. He nodded. You're not the first. Silence hit me. I asked, how many? He said, enough victims to form a pattern. I closed the folder slowly. So, this was never random. He replied, no. It's a method. My voice dropped. A system. He nodded. Yes. I leaned back. Why are you helping me? He said, because they tried to pull me in once too. That changed everything. Later, Sophie stopped me in the hallway again. She whispered, sir, she's acting strange. I asked Amelia. She nodded. She's making calls all night. I said, to who? She shook her head. I don't know. Then she added, Daniel hasn't been seen since yesterday. I replied, he's running. She looked down. I think she's scared. I said quietly, good. That night, Amelia came home early. She smiled. You're home before me today. I replied calmly, work finished early. She touched my arm. You've been distant. I said, I've been busy. She studied me. Something feels different. I asked, different how? She hesitated. You're calmer. I smiled. Is that bad? She shook her head quickly. No, just unusual. I poured myself a drink. Maybe I'm finally relaxing. She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. Later, she asked, do you still trust me? I looked at her and said, of course I do. She stared at me. Really? I nodded. Why wouldn't I? She smiled weakly. Nothing. But her hand was shaking slightly. That was the first crack in her now. After she slept, I met Charlotte again through a private call. She said, we have enough to move to the next stage. I asked, which is? She replied, asset restriction filings. I said, do it. She warned, this will escalate everything. I answered, good. Oliver listened beside me. He said, you're really doing it now. I replied, I started at the moment she chose him. He asked, do you still love her? I stayed silent. Then I said, that question doesn't matter anymore. The next morning, Richard Hartwell called me. His voice was sharp. Why are accounts being frozen? I replied calmly, I don't know what you mean. He said, don't play games with me. I asked, games. He snapped, Amelia is your wife. I smiled slightly. Yes. He said, then fix this. I replied, fix what exactly? He went quiet. Then he said, we are family. I said, interesting definition of family. He warned, you're making a mistake. I replied, no, I'm correcting one. And I ended the call. Oliver said, that was bold. I said, that was necessary. That evening, Amelia came to me again. She said softly, are you angry with me? I looked at her. I said, no. She asked, then what is it? I replied, nothing has changed. She relaxed slightly. But I continued, I still trust you. That was the lie she needed to hear. Because now I was no longer reacting. I was building. Every call, every file, every freeze, every silence. It was all leading somewhere. And for the first time in weeks, I felt control. Not over her, over the outcome. And I knew one thing clearly now. She thought she was hiding her world from me. But I was already inside it. Oliver called me early. He said, it started. I asked, what started? He replied, everything. I sat up. Explain. He said, accounts are public now. Investigations are open. I stayed silent for a moment. Then I asked, Amelia? He said she knows. I replied, good. Charlotte entered my office later and said, Daniel Whitmore has been arrested. I looked up. On what charges? She answered, fraud, fake investments, offshore laundering. I nodded slowly. So it's confirmed. She added, and Richard Hartwell's company is under investigation. I leaned back. The whole structure is falling. She said, yes, and fast. That evening, Amelia came into the room. She said softly, Ethan, we need to talk. I looked at her. About what? She sat down quickly. Something is happening. The accounts, the lawyers, people are calling my father. I said calmly, sounds serious. She grabbed my hand. Please, tell me you know what's going on. I looked at her hand on mine. Then I slowly pulled it away. I said, I do know. Her face froze. You what? I replied, everything. Silence hit the room. She whispered, no, that's not possible. I stood up. Daniel is arrested. She stepped back. What? I continued. Your father is under investigation. Her voice cracked. Stop. I said, and the accounts you built? Frozen. She shook her head. You're lying. I looked at her. Am I? She tried to speak, but nothing came out. Then she suddenly broke. Ethan, please. I can fix this, she said quickly. We can fix this together. I stared at her. She cried, I love you. I never meant. I interrupted, stop. She froze. I said quietly, don't use that word now. She whispered, please. I replied, it's too late. She stepped forward. I made mistakes, but I didn't mean to hurt you. I looked at her directly. You planned it. She shook her head fast. No, I didn't. I said, I saw everything. She went silent. Then she collapsed onto the chair. Oliver walked in at that moment. He looked at her and then at me. He said softly, it's done. I nodded. It's done. Amelia looked at Oliver. You knew. He didn't answer. That silence hurt her more than words. She whispered, everyone knew. I said, not everyone. Just enough. She looked at me desperately. Ethan, please don't do this. I replied, I already did. She stood up quickly. I gave you everything. I said no. You took everything. Her voice broke. I loved you. I said, and I believed you. That line hit her harder than anything else. Charlotte called me right after. She said, more victims are coming forward. I replied, good. She asked, do you want public filing next? I said yes. Oliver looked at me. You're really ending it. I said, it ended the moment she chose him over me. Amelia cried harder now. She said, I had no choice. I looked at her. Everyone has a choice. She whispered, I was scared. I replied, so was I. But I stayed loyal. She dropped to her knees. Please don't destroy my father. I said quietly, you already did that. She looked up at me, broken. I felt nothing. No anger. No love. Just distance. Marcus called me then. He said, more victims are speaking. I replied, how many? He said, enough to bury them. I closed my eyes. Good. When I opened them again, Amelia was still crying. But I wasn't the same man she married. I said, get up. She didn't move. I said again, get up. She slowly stood. I looked at her and said, this is the end. She whispered, don't say that. I replied, it already is. Oliver stepped closer to me. He said, you okay? I said no. He asked, then what are you? I looked at Amelia one last time and said, free. She broke completely after that. And I turned away because I didn't need to watch anymore. The collapse was already done. Oliver adjusted his tie and whispered, last day. I nodded. Yes. He asked, how do you feel? I replied, calm. He studied my face. Not angry. I shook my head. No. He said quietly, that's new. I looked toward the courtroom doors. Anger ended when truth started. Charlotte approached us. They're ready for your testimony. I nodded. Let's finish it. Inside the courtroom, everything felt quiet. Amelia sat across the room. Her eyes met mine. She looked smaller than I remembered. Charlotte whispered, just answer honestly. I said, I will. The judge signaled me forward. I sat and spoke clearly. Yes, I transferred funds after marriage. Yes, I trusted her completely. Yes, I later discovered unauthorized movements. The lawyer asked, did you confront your wife? I replied, not immediately. Why, he asked. I wanted proof, I said. He nodded. And you found it? Yes, I answered. Amelia looked down. The lawyer continued. Did you act out of revenge? I paused. Then I said no. I acted for truth. Silence filled the room. I stepped down. Oliver whispered, you did well. I replied, I just told the truth. Then Daniel was brought in. He avoided my eyes. Charlotte leaned closer. He's pleading for reduced sentence. I said, that's not my concern. Moments later, Richard Hartwell took the stand. His voice shook. I watched quietly. Oliver murmured, "He looks finished." I replied, "He finished himself." Victoria sat behind them. Her expression was broken. She whispered something to Amelia. Amelia wiped her tears. Then she suddenly looked at me again. This time, she didn't plead. She just looked empty. Charlotte said softly, "Verdict soon." I exhaled slowly. The judge returned. "Daniel Whitmore is sentenced." I didn't listen to the numbers. I only heard the end. Custodial sentence effective immediately. Daniel closed his eyes. Then came Richard. Financial fraud, conspiracy. His shoulders dropped. Victoria covered her face. Amelia didn't move. Everything collapsed quietly. Oliver whispered, "It's over." I nodded. Yes. After the session, Amelia approached me slowly. "Ethan," she said. I stopped. She looked at me carefully. "You won." I replied, "No." Truth did. Her voice cracked. "I lost everything." I said gently, "You chose everything." She whispered, "Do you hate me?" I thought for a moment. Then I said no. She looked surprised. I continued, "I just don't feel anything anymore." Tears filled her eyes again. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I nodded. "I know." She asked quietly, "Is there any chance?" I shook my head. "No." She closed her eyes. Then she stepped back. No drama. No begging. Just silence. Oliver walked beside me. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. He smiled slightly. "You survived." I said, "Barely." Charlotte joined us outside. "Your assets are restored," she said. I nodded. "Thank you." She added, "You handled this better than most." I replied, "I just stopped lying to myself." Oliver laughed softly. "That's harder than revenge." We stepped outside the courthouse. The air felt lighter. I looked at the sky. Oliver said, "What now?" I answered, "I moved forward." He asked, "No celebration?" I shook my head. "Peace is enough." He smiled. "You've changed." I said quietly, "Pain changes people." Charlotte shook my hand. "Take care, Ethan." "I will," I replied. Oliver stayed beside me. We walked down the steps together. Behind me, Amelia remained standing alone. I didn't turn back, because I didn't need closure anymore. I already had it. Oliver asked, "Do you regret anything?" I thought carefully. Then I said, "Only trusting blindly." He nodded. "But you trusted again. Yourself." I smiled slightly. And for the first time in months, I felt something simple. Not happiness. Not revenge. Just peace. And that peace felt like freedom.